Okay, welcome to the September 23rd, 2019 regular meeting of the Salina City Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Mayor Davis.
Here.
Commissioner Hay.
Here.
Commissioner Hodges.
Here.
Commissioner Hoppick.
Here.
Commissioner Ryan.
Here. If you're able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we have no awards or proclamations, so we can move right into the Citizens Forum, which is an opportunity for any citizen to address the commission on any item that's not on the agenda. We simply ask that your comments be limited to 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is John Blanchard. I live at 250 South 9th Street. This morning I watched last week's meeting of the City Commission, and Ms. Joan Ratliff stood up and indicated to you that you had violated the Kansas Open Meetings Act. And you had said that you would look into the matter, but I think, as I heard her, she wasn't asking you, she was informing you. And I have to tell you that I too feel you, not just feel you have, but you let you know you did violate the Kansas Open Meetings Act. I verified that this morning. I called down to the city manager's office and asked if email notifications had been sent out to the people on the list who requested to receive email notifications of meetings. That is the number one reason and only reason why that open meetings notification was violated. So it really wouldn't have taken any time at all last week if just one of you that were here would have asked, turned to the city manager and asked, did we properly notify? It took me 5 seconds on a phone call this morning. I think what it does is it shows a lack of concern and oversight for a process. There are a lot of things that go on with city government. I can only suggest the way that it's open meetings and open records are serious business. I mean, it should be of a major embarrassment to have an open records or a open meeting violation. When I was on the commission, this is just a suggestion, it's what I did, and particularly when I was mayor. If I saw that we had a special meeting coming up or that multiple commissioners may attend a public event, I would always ask Jason Gage if we were noticed up. And it'd be just that simple. Are we noticed up? I'd either ask him in person or send him an email. 99% of the time it was, I believe we are, but I'll double check. I don't know of a single instance when we weren't. I think he had a really good record on that. And I will tell you, he did a good job of doing that job. But that is the job of the city manager. The responsibility lies with you. Okay, it's a very easy thing to verify that you guys are covered. I also am questioning as to why a discussion of the violation of the COMA was not on today's agenda. And knowing that it wouldn't take an entire week until Friday to figure out whether there was a violation. As an aside, I will let you know that I have formally filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office. Okay? What I would hope that you would do today is that you would make a motion to add a discussion of that to your agenda, and after fully vetting that, decide whether or not it is appropriate for you to notify the Attorney General that you violated instead of waiting for me and others to make those complaints. I would urge you to be proactive. I know that there's probably been time spent to figure out things like, oh, well, we notified in other ways, or, oh, it's just a technical violation. it's a violation. I would hope that you would take citizen involvement and the spirit of the Open Meetings Act seriously. It is the cornerstone of our participatory form of government, okay? So please do that. And that's a very simple thing. It's a motion and a second. Add it to your agenda. But I would hope that on Tuesday morning is probably when you find out you had the violation, that you would have worked to have that included on the agenda today instead of putting it, what I understand to be from your secretary, that it will be brought up in other business. And it seems to me that that's kind of a way of keeping it kind of out of sight instead of having a full airing of that issue. So I would hope that you will, as I said, add that to your agenda and consider seriously self-reporting on that item. Thank you.
Thank you.
I came prepared to speak to that, but if you prefer to amend the agenda, that would be fine.
With regard to the concern that the commissioners did not ask for an investigation, the city manager volunteered to do that on his own, so there was no real reason for us to do that. This would be an appropriate time to respond. Thank you.
Well, I don't want to preclude anyone else. If you want to make it an agenda item, that would be fine. If you'd like me to report now, I can. With respect to, the question being raised on Monday, I think there was confusion on all our parts and is described how the former city manager would have responded. I would have responded that day the same way. I think we provided notice, but I need to double check. So what you may or may not be aware of is state statute it doesn't provide provisions for just public notice in general. It speaks to personal notice or notice of individuals that request with us to be provided notice. And so we maintain a email distribution list primarily based on topic, whether that's the City Commission, Planning Commission, and we distribute those emails. I was aware, on Monday, I was aware that more general public notice was issued to, by way of press release to the media and others, and that distribution list is pretty sizable. In all honesty, as that conversation was going on, I called up that email list expecting to find Ms. Ratzliff on that distribution list, and the conversation moved too quickly. I've since verified she was not on that list. The second list that is directed at people that request notice, found out by human error, that notice did not go out. So that is a violation of that statute that requires us to provide notice. My intention was to report that out to you today and offer up that there are some things with respect to that matter and disclosure that might merit executive session discussion, but the question is whether we wish to provide notice to the Attorney General's office of that failure to provide notice.
Is there any, well, go ahead and make your comment first.
I just had a few questions. I wasn't here last week, so I'd like to thank Ms. Ratzlaff for sending the email, because I wouldn't have known about that, but I was going to address it under the consent agenda in the minutes there. But so let's see, you've answered my first question. We didn't distribute the notice. And speaking to something Mr. Blanchard brought up, whose responsibility is it for circulating the meeting notice? Is that something that, obviously we have oversight, so maybe we should do a better job of checking in with you, because there are a lot of instances where we get invited to some of the same receptions or events or whatever.
There's a lot there.
I'm sorry.
No, that's a good point. I think I'm going to ask the city attorney to speak to the record, the custodian of that responsibility.
Right.
That's one part of the question.
Right.
Your point about being invited and attending different events, we, in the city manager's office, try to be mindful of the invitations we see,
Right.
but we're not entirely mindful of, everything that's going on. But I'd like the city attorney to speak to kind of where that responsibility ultimately lies. Staff, city manager's office, and additional staff are the ones that practically do that, and we feel like the responsibility lies with us, but...
Certainly, statutorily under the Open Meetings Act, the responsibility for notice is specifically the chair of the body that is convening in the meeting. Under the city manager form of government, certainly that the processing of agendas, your distribution, notification of meetings and so forth is certainly, as you know, handled by it's an administrative function under the direction of the city manager and then his delegee as far as how that occurs administratively. As to the other point, there is a distinction here, I think, that is hopefully helpful, and that is the difference between when you are truly meeting, which obviously in this case you were, and those circumstances where it is possible that a majority of a quorum of you could be present, not necessarily known or unknown in anticipation of the event, but those where you might have been invited and that there could be a majority of you present. That is the circumstance in which routinely it's not required as a matter of law, but as a matter of additional notice, any press release that goes out of the city manager's office with regard to that type of circumstance generally makes clear that there is that possibility. But as you all, I'm sure, are aware, if by whatever circumstance you are not in a meeting, but you find yourself in the presence of a majority of the body, excuse me, you're advised not to engage in interactive communication. Certainly, that's the safest course, but in no event would you engage in interactive communication regarding the business of the city.
Yeah, I think it's an extra level of protection, at least certainly my policy is any activity that I'm invited to, and I think the other commissioners do the same. We certainly notify the administrator in the city manager's office, just in case other commissioners might happen to show up.
And when we do give that notice of an official meeting, what requirements or components are required to be in that notification? Time, place, address?
Yes, I think you've covered generally
Okay.
the
All right.
statutory elements.
And then my last question, I guess, is probably what we're facing right now. I was going to ask if we, did go ahead and self-report it. Just, I'd rather, I understand we can't be proactive at this point because there may already be a complaint pending, but, if we did violate, I'm fine with a self-report. I think it looks better when, if you realize that a mistake has been made, if you self-report as opposed to not. That's all I had to say.
Is there
Staff concurs, that's where we were headed.
is there a motion to add that to the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. It's been a motion and a second to add the issue of self-reporting of an open meetings violation to today's agenda. That would require 4 votes, I believe.
Yes, it would, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0, and we'll add it as 7.6. All right, thank you. And thanks for bringing that issue up so we can make sure that we administratively plug any leaks in the system that might be there, although it's a system that works 99.99% of the time, but we have to strive for 100%. Anyone else to come forward for the Citizens Forum? Okay, we'll move on to public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time. I'm sorry, okay, we'll go back to number 4, Citizens Forum. Please come forward. Yeah.
you all remember
Sorry,
me.
could you give your name to the
Oh,
clerk,
yeah.
please?
My name is Tanya Greer, and is that it? And I'm here to discuss about the breed-specific legislation. But not only that, I wasn't prepared to be blind when I had to move back to my hometown, which was Salina, Kansas. I lost my sight in my left eye, already had no sight in my right eye. I had my dogs in Colorado where there was no breed-specific legislation. And these dogs were like my children because they were with me as little puppies before I lost my sight in May of 2017. I had to sell my home in Colorado, leave my kids and my grandkids, and come back here. Unfortunately for me, I had a house that I bought in '96 that resides at Maple Avenue. So when I came back, it wasn't livable. And I did a lot of work to the home. And when I first got there, 3 days after I got there, my dogs were taken because they got in a fight over a bone. Well, I did not know there was a breed-specific ban, as well as I did not know my dogs were considered pit bulls. I took great care of medical records of my condition. I have all the vet work of my dogs, both dogs' conditions and their well-being and their care. I have all kinds of documents on the fact that for 8 months, I can handle not being blind. But what I cannot handle is being bullied by the city and not being allowed to see those dogs for 8 months while at that animal shelter and a kennel. And it took me to appeal to get to see them for 2 weeks. When I got them back, I lost Capone again due to the same neighbor that caused me problems on August 11th of 2018. This woman got away with trespassing on my property. She got away with beating on my house with a bat. She got away with assaulting and attempted assault and battery and threatening to kill my dog and shoot it with a gun. What I don't get is why on earth would a blind woman run from her home with spray and I guess I had 2 toothbrushes. Why would I do that and let my dogs run free knowing the consequence if I didn't feel my life was in danger? And this lady is getting away with a fabricated story that my dogs were at large. Well, heck yeah, they were at large because I wasn't going to run outside without them. And I definitely wasn't going to run outside without protection, especially when I can't see. And I have medical forms that I've given the judge, my attorneys, and it's like everybody just looked right over the fact that this lady is blind. And there's a story, more of a story to this case than what they're releasing. And I'm here to let you know I'm innocent of every single charge other than running to my church to try to get away from whoever was on my property, which I found out 5 months later, which doesn't surprise me because when I went to district court and appealed it and got the new plea, I went over a month later over to municipal court and they had still not sent over and done any of the paperwork, and that was a month and a half. Finally, July 14th, Capone was picked up from my house from the animal shelter. And on the 15th, they finally filed, grabbed whatever district court had for them, and put it in their records on the 15th. So I just feel like, along with what they said before, what we were talking about before, people need to start doing a little more research, a little more, cluing into each person's case, because everybody has a different situation. And mine's a little more dramatic than the normal. But I just feel like, it's not the dog ones. Let me get back to the dogs now. It's not the dogs. It's the owner who raises and teaches them how to be and not to be. You can make an angry dog if you neglect it. You can make an angry dog if you abuse it. You can make an angry dog if you want it to fight with other dogs. But you can't make an angry dog when you love them like they're your own children. And I am one of those people. And I heard that they put down my Capone. Said he was unadoptable, which was not true. And I just want y'all to know that that was like taking my baby boy as if he was my own. It just, I don't know why, like it did not matter. But I am thankful for the national Clear the Shelters, because that gives so many more dogs loving homes, and they aren't just thrown out and destroyed like they didn't matter. Because Capone mattered to me. And I got started in Colorado, and I'm going to be going there soon, but I have eye conditions that I have to continue to see every 3 to 4 days, so I can't leave Salina quickly, but I plan on leaving to be back home with my family. Even though my family lives here, but my kids and grandchildren are there. So I just wanted to express myself because the pain is still there. And it probably will be here for a very long time. And that's really all I have to say. And if anybody wants any information, you could go to animallaw.info. You can go to, I have all kinds of paperwork if you guys need to be educated on anything regarding breed-specific and disabled and Federal Housing Equal Opportunity Act. So, anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Do we have, isn't there, we're waiting on that ordinance to be brought back to the city commission?
Correct. With respect to the breed-specific legislation, staff has worked up an outline. This is a very complicated issue, and we certainly want to give you an objective and thorough overview. So we're working on that. We haven't targeted an agenda date for it to be before you. The matter that Ms. Greer is talking about is more specific to particular dogs that were found to be in violation of our current breed-specific ban. So, and a lot of people say that, you know, it's personal to the owner, it's personal to the dog. The ordinance that we have in effect today is very specific in terms of banning pit bulls in their entirety. We have an approach in place that provides for a compliance agreement where agreement can be reached for the owner to either remove the pit bulls from Salina, and they can enter into an agreement to do that, or they can transfer ownership, and that other person that the ownership is transferred to also signs the documentation and acknowledges their knowledge of the breed-specific ban in Salina, and it provides for a loss of ownership and disposition of the dogs if that compliance agreement is violated. So Ms. Greer's, and I have no intention of trying all that here today, but Ms. Greer has been very involved in terms of citation, municipal court, compliance agreement, appealing to district court, transferring ownership, the dogs leaving Salina and returning to Salina. I've looked at all of that in terms of how we got to the point that we are. And I would agree that it's unfortunate that we arrived at this point, but as the ordinances provide and as the court orders provide, I think everything that we did was predictable.
Do we have any idea when that's going to be brought to us?
I'm hoping in the next 30 days, but it is a sizable undertaking for staff.
I understand that because I will agree with her on one thing. I mean, the owners are going to start taking responsibility. You know, we've banned pit bulls, but you've got Dobermans, you've got Rottweilers, you've got German Shepherds. If the owners take care of those dogs and those dogs are treated right, like I said, I just think that's something we really need to take a look at it, that this ordinance needs to be, as far as I'm concerned, needs to be repealed.
And I would just like to, I would like to agree with you, Commissioner Hay, just in terms of the Animal Control Advisory Board, I believe issued some recommendations well over a year ago, and if there's any way that we could have it brought back in the next 30 days, I think that would be great, because we need to have this discussion and decide which way we're going to go, one way or the other, but I think that these folks and our own advisory board do deserve, an answer on that in terms of whether we're going to move forward with a change or not, or leave the ban in place. But
Right.
they've been very patient.
They have, and staff shared with the Animal Control Advisory Board the outline that we've prepared. Part of my concern is providing you enough history of how it is that Salina got to where we are, and as objectively as possible addressing is it the breed, is it the owner, that whole question, because that continues to circulate. I don't personally have the answer. We're trying to provide you with appropriate information so you can make that decision.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to make a comment on that.
Please come up to the front there.
My name is Rita Lachelle. I don't have a story like hers. Mine is, I had a pit bull back when the ban came into place. I did everything that the city required. I will say the animal shelter came to my house to inspect my fence. They looked at my dog, you could see she was pit bull, and they said, "Who told you she's pit bull?" She had no demeanor, as this BSL says. She was not mean, she was not aggressive. She would jump her fence. This was prior to the ban. She would jump the fence. Never had an issue with anybody complaining about her other than getting loose. There was a time she got loose. Animal shelter come to get her. She jumped into their vehicle. That's how friendly she was. Not every pit bull is mean. Just like not every Doberman Pinscher, not every Rottweiler. I have a rat terrier that I would worry more about biting somebody than I would have ever thought my pit bull would have done. I walked onto the property when I picked that puppy up, thinking these were lab puppies. I saw the mother. She was full bred. Did not have an ounce of fear. I had never, ever seen a pit bull before till that day, but have never had a fear of that dog. And unless you guys are highly educated about these dogs or about any dog, it has nothing to do with the breed. It is the owner. And until we make that clear, this is going to continue. You're going to have, I ain't going to lie, I know there's pit bulls out there, and you're going to continue having people hide them because Salina is behind the times. You didn't have the national coverage of a German Shepherd attack or a Rottweiler attack or a Doberman Pinscher attack. It was not until the pit bull came out that all of a sudden it became there was aggressive dogs. Salina needs to do research and see that it is not the dog. It is the owner. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Okay, we'll now move back to public hearing 5.1. Yeah, go ahead. We'll just start from as if we had never started before.
Item 5.1, public hearing on naming rights for Salina Animal Shelter Surgical Center. 5.1A, resolution number 19-7739, naming the storage area at the Salina Animal Shelter as the Smedley Family Surgical Center.
Mr.
Good
Tuck,
afternoon,
how you
Mayor,
doing?
members of the commission. On December 18, 2006, the City Commission approved Resolution Number 6-6343, setting forth the guidelines for naming a municipal facility. On October 9, 2017, these guidelines were amended to the current version used today. The policy outlines a 5-step process. Step 1 is designating the storage area at the Salina Animal Shelter as a qualified facility to be named. This was approved by the City Commission at the August 26, 2019 meeting. Step 2, the city clerk verified compliance with the naming initiative. No petition is needed for this naming initiative, as this naming meets with the guidelines for philanthropic naming. Step 3, the policy was taken on June 5th, 2019. Please note, the municipal facility naming guidelines call for this step in the process to be completed within 45 days. Because the Animal Control Advisory and Appeals Board only meets quarterly, this was discussed at their June meeting in advance of the City Commission action on August 26th. Their next meeting is not scheduled until November, and staff would like to get the project complete in fiscal year 2019. If desired, staff can return this item to the ACAAB Board at the November meeting to process it in the proper order. However, in Section 5 of Resolution Number 17-7481, amendments or variances may be considered from time to time by the City Commission as deemed necessary to meet the public interest. This is Step 4, the public hearing. The City Commission shall conduct a public hearing and consider the naming initiative for a qualified municipal facility within 30 calendar days of receiving a recommendation from a related board or from receipt of the naming initiative if no related board exists. Notice the public hearing was published on Friday, September 13th. Fiscal note, this project will be fully funded from the Animal Service donation account where the Smedley Family Trust funds were deposited. With a 15% contingency, the cost to complete the project will be approximately $54,543.63. This project will be accomplished by a combination of local forces and through bidding out 3 portions of the work. The electrical, plumbing, and storefront portions will be bid out. In accordance with the purchasing policy, this will come back before the commission at a later date for approval. The scope of the project will entail adding an HVAC system, framing out the interior walls, installing drywall, doors, windows, new cabinets and tables, and a new exterior facade for the facility that identifies it as a surgical center. Staff is not asking for any financial approval at this time. The proposed action is consistent with the following component of the city's shared vision statement. Goal number 3, the city will provide the highest quality of services consistent with governing body direction, available resources, and staff commitment to quality. At this time, staff requests the approval of resolution number 19-7739, naming the storage area at the Salina Animal Shelter as the Smedley Family Surgical Center.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
The only comment I have to make is just to thank the generosity of the Smedley family and specifically Ms. Smedley, who made this bequest, and to just say that I'm very excited for the animal shelter to have this new facility to operate in, literally operate in. Thank you.
My next step after this will be to bring you step 5, which will bring I will bring forth at that time the budget for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? Hearing none. Any action from the commission?
Mayor Davis, I move that we approve resolution number 19-7739, naming the storage area at the Salina Animal Shelter as the Smedley Family Surgical Center.
Second. Suppose I should have closed the public hearing before then, but we'll consider it functionally closed. Any further discussion? That was my omission. All in favor of approving resolution 19-7739, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the special meeting minutes of September 16, 2019, and 6.2, approve the regular meeting minutes of September 16, 2019.
Okay. Any item that a commissioner would like to have removed from the consent agenda?
Mayor.
I'm sorry, I was just going to request that we remove item 6.2, the regular meeting minutes of September 16, 2019.
All right, 6.2 will be removed. Any action on item 6.1?
I move that we approve item 6.1, the special meeting minutes of September 16, 2019.
Second. All right, any questions or discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes of the special meeting of September 16, 2019, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries 5-0. And item 6.2.
The reason that for my request to remove item 6.2 is the email that we all received from Joan Ratzliff wanting to correct a statement that was made or attributed to her at that meeting, and just wanting, in the minutes it says that she mentioned the joint meeting with the Salina County Commission today and asked if public notice was sent, and she notified us that she did not ask if notices had been sent. She informed the commission that she had not received one and explained the COMA application. And since we did receive that specific correction from her, I'm hoping that we can include that in the official minutes of September 16th.
And that was made during our regular, the
Regular
comments were
meeting.
verified?
Right.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'm going to take a stab. I move that the minutes of the regular meeting of September 16th, 2019 be corrected to state, Joan Ratzliff, Salina, mentioned the joint meeting with the Salina County Commission today and said that public notices had not been sent and explained the COMA application.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the regular meeting minutes of September 16th with the correction as stated by Commissioner Hodges. Any further questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you for the correction. We'll now go to administration, item 7.1.
Item 7.1, resolution number 19-7743, amending resolution number 17-7458 to provide additional funding in an amount not to exceed $5,900,000 for the cost of designing and constructing a police training facility.
Ms. Pack.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. On June 5th, 2017, the governing body adopted Resolution 17-7458 authorizing the new training police facility in an amount of $4,900,000. On August 12, 2019, the Commission awarded a construction contract for this project to Compton Construction in the amount of $4,998,000 with a $249,900 contingency. At that time, staff presented a budget that totaled $5,865,112. The project was estimated in the 2017 CIP program to be $4,900,000. With these additional costs, the estimated improvements for this project are now approximately $5.9 million, plus interest on temporary financing and cost issuance. The cost of the improvements and the associated financing costs shall be payable from proceeds of general obligation bonds that the city issues under the authority of KSA 12-1736. While the budget for this project remains unchanged at $5,865,112, as reported to Commission back in August, it is necessary for the City Commission to approve the authorization of the project at $5,900,000. That's just a rounded number. This does not ultimately mean that that amount will be financed, but it does allow us to finance in that up to that amount. The cost of this, as I mentioned earlier, would be under general obligation temporary notes and eventually general obligation bonds, which will be paid from the sales tax capital fund. There's 4 options for your action this evening. Approve Resolution 19-7743, changing the authorization amount for this project to $5.9 million. Approve the resolution with amendments as you see appropriate. Postpone consideration of the resolution to a specific time and date and provide us with direction. Or vote to deny the resolution and provide us with direction on how to fund the project to its full budget amount.
Thank you. Any
If you
questions?
have any questions, feel free to.
I had emailed some questions earlier today, and they may have been discussed in the previous discussion of this issue, but I was just wondering if perhaps you could provide an idea of the costs incurred to date, what some of those items were, just in terms of how we got to the $465,000 number, and also the other remaining costs that we've still got outstanding, and that may not have reached you in time, and I apologize.
No, I did get that, and I appreciate that. When we presented the original budget back on August the 12th, we had approximately $430,000 that had been spent to date. The cost of that included the acquisition of the Yost property. It included approximately $286,000 of police design facility services, some appraisal services, and also some publication costs in that number. We also had some financing costs included in that $430,000 because we had issued temporary notes at that time.
Right. Okay.
Since that time, we've spent an additional $54,000 with police design facility and $200 to mow the lot. So at this time, our total cost is $484,645.98. That's what's been spent on the project to date.
Gotcha. And in terms of the original contract that we have with PFDG, we still have some funds set back for when they are involved in the construction process. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Our original project contract with them was $400,000. To date, we've paid them, we have a remaining balance of $66,775 on that original contract.
Thank you.
Were the costs for evaluating the center fire site paid on an as-you-go basis out of another source of
They came out of
income?
this project budget, but yes, they were paid on an as-you-go basis, which is in part causing the need for the supplemental agreement that's 2 agenda items later.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions? Any questions, comments from the public?
Mayor and Commissioners, thank you. Rod France, 2214 Mayfair Drive. I would respectfully request that you postpone consideration of this item. In looking at the information sheet that was provided and juxtaposing that with information from the sales tax capital improvement program that you discussed earlier this year at budget time, it is true that this project is a part of that program. However, it's a part of the program at $4.9 million, and the additional $1 million generates another $100,000 a year in debt service payments out of the sales tax fund. And it appears to me, although my numbers may not be totally complete, that does not fit, and that there are some other projects that need to be either reduced, rescheduled, reallocated, something in order for this to be fully funded. Now, that does not have to happen today, but it is something you should consider doing in the near future, because it will be, if the projections hold true, there will not be funding to pay for all of the projects out of that fund with this addition. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Only from the podium. Yeah. And just give your name again, just in case someone...
Tanya Greer. I somewhat agree with this gentleman. I think that is an awful lot of money to put into the police training. I think other things could be very wise where that money could go to, like a work-enders program, which is weekends where people that have a sentence and overcrowding in jails, they can do a work-enders program, or they can do what do you call that, work release programs. I'm surprised that Salina hasn't got something really good and solid and set up in that effect. It would probably get a lot of people that are using a lot of drugs on the streets off the streets, teach them how to work, find jobs, apply that, what they're not doing, and just getting in trouble and applying it to something that's productive. I don't know if we have something like that here, but I think that would probably be something I would start with first before I'd start with the training, because I think our officers are pretty well intact. But that's just my comment on it, if you're going to spend that kind of money.
No, and not to repeat anything you said, our officers are intact. Their training facility right now is not. But, and, it should be noted that if you look at when this was originally authorized and the time this summer that we actually got to the point of truly approving this, it's 2 years. A lot of that delay was not of our own doing. The cost of the building is not going to do anything but get more expensive. And I don't know of a building in town that's in worse shape than this one. At least that has our name associated with it. That's just my personal opinion.
I would ask staff to maybe respond to Mr. Francis' comment.
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know when we brought this forward and we knew that this was going to be over budget, we did explain what the difference in that debt service amount was going to be. I think it was somewhere around $65,000 a year, and that we had there would have to be some concessions in the sales tax fund. We knew that. We've looked at that spreadsheet multiple times. But we did recognize that that was over budget from the original assumptions that we had made back in 2018.
Yeah, I would agree with that characterization. As we went through CIP planning and budget planning and then this particular project, staff was trying to be mindful of identifying the additional annual cost and recognizing that, that spreadsheet that we kept walking you through in terms of what was committed to on the left-hand side and what was left as optional expenditures on the right-hand side is that decision point that we're going to continue to have to face. The river project is one of the remaining big-ticket items that's on that spreadsheet. We had some conversations about, the funding level for the street project, and you asked us to keep that at that level. There was some conversation about, do we need to look at proportional reductions in projects that are discretionary? So I wouldn't disagree that it is over the original budget. It carries with it additional cost, and if it's going to be funded out of the sales tax fund, we have to take that into account going forward.
I don't know if this is a question for staff as much as it is just for a question for the governing body. In terms of when we do have a project that we see a significant cost overrun, because $1 million on a $5 million project, it's a big difference. At what point do we then return to our previous obligations for that sales tax fund and say, okay, we acknowledge that this is going to cost us an additional 65 or whatever per year, and to make the numbers work, this is the project that we're going to postpone, or this is the project that we're going to reduce. I mean, is that something that we, obviously we didn't do it in this instance, but like going forward, is that something that we want to consider being able to address our remaining priorities and our remaining obligations for that sales tax fund and make some decisions about, what's going to get cut? Or is that something that maybe we should address? I know we're scheduled for a financial update maybe in mid-October, was that right? Do we have another financial update as a study session item?
I'd have to go back and look.
Okay, well, I think that it's definitely something that bears discussion, acknowledging that we've put a burden on our sales tax fund, and then we need to, figure out what we're going to reduce so that our numbers still work. So, I don't know.
That's probably a yearly activity in the budgeting process.
I think we looked at this, we did look at that because when this came up before, we talked about there's going to be some give and take, and we're going to have to end up taking some somewhere else if we're going to make this work. And like the mayor said, we've been on this for the last 2 years trying to get this thing approved, and we finally all got in consensus, okay, we need to get this done. And so we knew, at least I remember the $65,000 number with being in there. And so I guess the way I look at it is, when those other projects start to come down the line, we're going to have to say, okay, we're going to have to back up here and take a look at these, what can we cut from the rest of this stuff since we backed up and funded this.
If it's helpful, as part of the fiscal notes going forward, we can try to be mindful of attaching that entire sales tax spreadsheet and speaking to that. I think I tried to be pretty frank in the budget discussions. A lot of those spending commitments have been made since 2016 to the present. I mean, if you recall, my analogy was not only did you get a raise, we got a new job and a larger paycheck, and we fell into the habit of new car and dinner and a movie on Friday nights, and we've kind of settled into a lot of commitments that are on the left hand of that side of that spreadsheet, if you recall, that are either debt finance that are commitments. There are a handful, but we certainly, as we talk about projects and you make these kind of decisions, we can bring that spreadsheet back to you and provide you, try to prompt that conversation project by project.
And I know one of the things I had brought up when we did and we're going to discuss under 7.5, the strategic plan summary, is that we had asked for, more regular financial reporting and things like that. And I think looking at it once a year is too late. And again, I don't know if whether some of that information needs to come to us quarterly or at least every 6 months to kind of keep an eye on where we are as far as the cash flow, sales tax, all that. And again, we leave it up to staff to make sure that we're within our guidelines of what we have for sales tax as far as funding our debt obligations. So that's the one thing I would ask for, is that we continue to try to get reports a little more often to keep us up to date. And again, one of the things we talk about 5.9, hopefully we have a 5% contingency in there, which is about $250,000, which we hope we don't use all of that, which will bring that number down some too, so.
Any,
I believe there's always variances, so that's part of our role here, to play some of that on the fly as we go.
right, is there action to be, did I ask for public comment?
Yes.
Did, okay, thank you. Action to be taken from the commission.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve Resolution 19-7743 and amending Resolution 17-7458.
Is there a second?
Second?
Been moved and seconded. I'm sorry.
Is that 43? Or did you say 43? I heard 58. I may not have.
It amends.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes, it's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 19-7743, amending Resolution 17-7458. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. 7.2.
Item 7.2, resolution number 19-7741, authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation temporary notes, Series 2019-12 with Bennington State Bank.
Welcome back.
Thank you, Commissioner Mayers. In November 2018, the city issued temporary notes in the amount of $13,500,000. Since that time, part of those notes have been been financed into long-term debt for the streetscape project, which left a portion of that temporary note still outstanding for the police training facility. As the project's been delayed, those notes become due in November 15th, 2019. Back in August, the City Commission approved Resolution 19-7735, authorizing staff to put those out for private placement to retire the notes that were maturing in November. On August 23rd, term sheets were received from 10 financial institutions with corresponding bids. And on September 9th, Commission accepted the bid from Bennington State Bank for private placement of the temporary notes at a rate of 2.07%. Today's action approves the resolution that finalizes the sale and the terms of the notes and authorizes the mayor to sign the note agreement with Bennington State Bank. These temporary notes are expected to become general obligation bonds issued in 2020 as the project becomes closer to complete. Your options tonight are to approve Resolution 19-7741, authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation temporary notes, Series 2019-2, with Bennington State Bank. Approve with amendments as you deem appropriate. Postpone consideration of this resolution and give us specific time and date and provide us with further direction. Or vote to deny Resolution 19-7741 and provide staff with direction on other options to pay off the temporary notes that mature in November of 2019. I have Dave Arterberry here if anybody has any technical questions.
Any questions? All right. Any questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, bring us back to the commission.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve Resolution number 19-7741, authorizing the issuance, sale, and delivery of general obligation temporary notes, Series 2019-2 with Bennington State Bank.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 19-7741 as just read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Item 7.3.
Item 7.3, resolution number 19-7742, authorizing the mayor to enter into a supplemental agreement to the June 12, 2017 agreement with Police Facility Design Group.
Chief Nelson.
Brad Nelson, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Davis and Commissioners. On June 12th of 2017, the city entered into an agreement with the Police Facility Design Group for the design and engineering of a police training center and range. As we previously stated, the fee for the service was $400,000. The majority of the design and engineering has been completed, and a construction bid was awarded on August 12th of this year. In fact, we're hopeful we're going to move dirt next week. There was unexpected evaluation and site work completed at the city's request at 3 additional sites. They were the center fire range evaluation, which was to survey the center fire's building's existing condition and evaluate the feasibility of retrofitting that to our needs. There was the Pestinger adjoining property evaluation, which to evaluate this property for its feasibility of constructing a new site at that location next to the center fire range. And thirdly, there was the Yost Drive evaluation, feasibility of constructing that building there. The total unanticipated cost incurred for additional evaluations of these 3 sites was $77,870, and if needed, I can break down the cost for each site if you'd like me to. But the center fire range site included additional cost of $45,875, and this included survey, platting, civil engineering, geotechnical work, additional evaluations, and environmental impact studies. And when I say the center fire range, I'm talking about both the adjoining property and the actual evaluating building. It's for both of them. The Yost Drive unanticipated costs were $31,995. They included survey, platting, civil engineering, geotechnical work, and environmental impact studies. These additional costs were presented at the time the bid with contract was awarded on August 12th of this year. It will be financed with temporary note proceeds that will be permanently financed with general obligation bonds supported by a sales tax. The action to consider is, number 1, approve this resolution to authorize the mayor to enter a supplemental agreement to the June 12, 2017 agreement with the Police Facility Design Group in the amount of $77,870. Approve this resolution with amendments as Commission directs. Number 3, postpone consideration of this resolution to a specific date and time and give staff direction on additional information requested by Commission for their consideration. And this may delay the project. Number 4, do not approve this resolution at this time, which will result in the need for the additional services in the original contract having to be reduced in order to cover the unexpected costs associated with the center fire and Yost Drive evaluation. The recommended action, the staff recommends option 1.
Thank you. Any questions or concerns? Comments?
Just quick question, the Yost Drive evaluation, was that not originally anticipated?
Correct, because we were originally going to build at the landfill.
Okay,
yeah,
so
on
that's,
State Street.
okay.
Yeah, that
That's
was
the reason.
completely,
I was thinking that when we did our proposal, it was knowing we were using the Yost, so, okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And I think my question was, what exactly is PFDG's role going to be in once construction gets started? Because I noticed that in the contract, it included 20% of their $400,000 fee would be reserved for the construction portion. And so are they going to be like taking some kind of like a direct supervisory role in the construction process? Like, are they going to be serving as a project manager?
I don't know if that title, though, it's kind of with the city, and they plan to be on site bi-weekly. They'll be here bi-weekly on the conditions, checks and conditions, but they're working with the city also, and my boss will probably have...
I would add that one of the decision points we had to make was whether we wanted to have an owner's representative on this
Right.
project. And we know how much those cost. So we sat down, Chief Nelson, Police Facility Design Group, Lauren Driscoll with Development Services, and the building official, and talked about exactly what the Police Facility Design Group was proposing to do. They were able to provide us with key milestones of the project. So in addition to just being bi-weekly, they identified steps in the process where they physically wanted to be on site and make construction observation. And then we had a conversation, the building official toured the site with them and talked with them in greater detail about what he could be doing as our representative, not as a building inspector like would be done on a typical permit project, because we can inspect to a different level of detail of our own project. So there's been some coordination between Development Services and the Building Official and Police Facility Design Group. So we can be their eyes and ears in the ground when they're not here, and then they've identified key milestones of the project where they specifically want to be here and observe. So we're trying to balance the cost and making sure that they're here at the appropriate points in the project.
And the remaining $66,000 is going to be enough to take care of that, those services and that obligation?
They seem very knowledgeable about kind of the phases and when they need to be here and how much work that would involve. So they've indicated that, yes, that would be the case.
That would all fall under the...
Now, if we end up with something that's unforeseen and it causes a need for them to come back and conduct unexpected inspections, then we start to get into that contingency amount.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor Davis, I move we approve resolution number 19-7742, authorizing the mayor to enter in a supplemental agreement to the June 12, 2017 agreement with the Police Facility Design Group in the amount of $77,870.
Second.
Okay, been moved and properly seconded to approve resolution 19-7742. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Item 7.4.
Item 7.4, application number Z19-9, filed by the Salina City Planning Commission requesting an amendment of section 42-508, temporary signs, banner signs, and mobile signs to eliminate the numerical limit on the number of temporary signs that can be placed on a lot during election season, and to eliminate the prohibition on the placement of temporary signs in the right-of-way during election season.
Mr. Andrew, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. This is a proposed zoning text amendment that we bring to you with some urgency because we're about to begin the 45-day period prior to the November election. And you might note that the time frame between 2015 and 2019 doesn't seem like we were acting with urgency, but the statute was passed in 2015. Then shortly after its passage, there was a major Supreme Court decision dealing with temporary signs, the Reed versus Town of Gilbert case, and you'll recall extended discussions with the commission about temporary signs in general. There was a belief that the Kansas legislature would act to amend or clean up some of the confusing aspects of this statute that was first passed in 2015, but each legislative session went by and they did not amend the bill. And then in November 2018, the Kansas Attorney General issued an opinion that concluded that the statute did not violate the First Amendment of the Constitution. And so the Kansas Attorney General indicated that a local jurisdiction could elect to enforce no local sign regulations at all, or could enforce regulations that do not regulate content or prohibit the placement of the number of signs in designated locations during the 45-day period prior to any election and the 2-day period following that. So we currently have a conflict between our city sign code, which first of all does place a numerical limit on the number of temporary signs that an owner can display on their property, and we also have a sign code that prohibits the placement of signs in the public right-of-way. And both those aspects are inconsistent with the state statute. So in discussing this with the city's legal counsel, they recommended creating new rules applicable to all non-commercial temporary signs so that all non-commercial temporary signs are subject to the same rules. And so there's a proposal to add a new subsection to section 42-508 that would allow an unlimited number of temporary signs during election season, and those temporary signs could display any message. And so the Planning Commission initiated this text amendment. The proposed changes before you are intended to bring our temporary sign regulations into conformance with KSA 252711. And it would do that by allowing an unlimited number of temporary signs to be placed and displayed on private property or on the unpaved public right-of-way for a period of up to 45 days prior to an election involving candidates for federal, state, or local office, and in which the property or public right-of-way is located, or involving an issue that's on the ballot. So if this were approved, it would allow an abutting property owner to go out and place a sign or give permission for a tenant to place a sign in the unpaved right-of-way abutting their property. So what it would not do is it wouldn't allow people to randomly place signs in the Belmont Boulevard median or the South 9th Street median. It would have to be in the right-of-way abutting their property. The signs would be limited to 8 square feet in size, but unlimited in number, and they could not be placed so as to obstruct visibility at any street or driveway intersection. So even though someone legally placed one in the right-of-way, if there were a complaint and staff determined that it was obstructing visibility at an intersection, we could request that it be relocated. At the same time, the city's legal counsel drafted optional language for the Planning Commission's consideration and your consideration. That language would eliminate the gap period or potential for a gap period where you would have a situation where signs were put out for the primary election in August, and then for a period between the August election and 45 days before the November election, they would have to be removed from the right-of-way. And so the Planning Commission endorsed what we call the no-gap approach, so that in years that you would have a primary election, the signs could be displayed continuously with no interruption through to the November general election. And so the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this matter, and there was one set of comments received from Joan Ratzlaff at that hearing. There were no other public comments received. They unanimously recommended adopting this text amendment and incorporating the optional language that eliminated the gap between the primary and general elections. Their finding was that by eliminating the gap, this would allow for more consistent, predictable, and efficient administration of the zoning ordinance and eliminate confusion as far as the enforcement of that ordinance goes. So your option would be to approve the proposed text amendment as drafted and put before you. This would require 3 affirmative votes. You could approve the amendment with any additions, deletions, or modifications you think is appropriate. That would require 4 affirmative votes. You could send this back to the Planning Commission and direct them to take a different approach. That would require 3 affirmative votes, or you could choose to decline to approve this ordinance and not make any changes. Should you choose option 1 because of the urgency related to the beginning of the fall election season, city staff would recommend that if you approve this on first reading, that it be done as first and second reading on the same day. And if you're supportive of that, the first step would be to make a motion to approve that ordinance on first reading, to vote. A motion should be made then to find a compelling public interest exists to allow first and second reading on the same day, with a vote on that motion, and then finally a motion to approve on second reading with a vote and a roll call. So you have the draft text amendment there, and then there's a red line version that shows you the specific language that was added to the existing code. And with that, we would attempt to answer any questions that you have, although I believe that will be a team effort.
We'll start from the left this time.
Couple questions. So if I read this right and listened to you, there's an unlimited number of signs that can be placed in a yard.
Correct.
Correctly.
Or in the unpaved right-of-way next to that yard.
I'm sorry, as a clarification, right-of-way only or right-of-way and yard?
I believe it's either location. You're not obliged to put it in the right-of-way, but there's unlimited number of signs during election
So you could have an
season.
unlimited number in the right-of-way as long as it's approved by the property owner. In a primary year, if a person is unsuccessful in the primary, are they required to remove their signs within 2 days, or do they stay?
Well, the answer I gave to the planning commission to that would be no, because it would require us to go out and read the sign and determine the content of the sign as to whose candidacy was on there, and that would be a content-based distinction. And as we informed the planning commission, the same thing is going to happen with a garage sale or some other type of sign. There, because of the limitations of Reed versus Town and Gilbert, we cannot distinguish between what are actually electoral or political signs and other types of temporary signs. So essentially, during that period, there would be no enforcement related to any kind of
Only
non-commercial
during
sign.
that period could they police?
Only during that period. So we would not direct or police the property owner to tell them. We would hope that the property owner would do that voluntarily, or perhaps the candidate who is not successful, but there would be no effort on city staff's part to try to enforce that.
And if I could, I'm repeating what Dean said, but you may recall when we talked about the sign ordinance amendments that we recently made, we had a lot of conversation about commercial, non-commercial speech and how much we could and couldn't regulate. So Dean made a distinction that as content goes, as long as it's a non-commercial sign, we don't feel like we have the opportunity to make a distinction based on that content. And in the staff report, which Dean didn't touch on in the verbal report, I personally struggled with the fact that the state statute was content-based. So, and not being an attorney, I fell back to, I think the statute's unconstitutional. Well, the Attorney General found a creative way to say that it was not unconstitutional, and that is, as a city, we can parse all this in a constitutional way, and that is we can comply with the state statute and not be content-based if we broaden our regulations to not only open up that time period and the right-of-way to political signs, but to all non-commercial signs. So just so we're clear, that can be opinion signs, fundraising signs. There's countless examples of directional signs. Even though the language talks about political signs, our approach to balance all this is much more lenient in terms of number and leaving it to be non-commercial signs, whatever their content may be.
Yeah, and I don't fault the city for this. I think it's a state of Kansas issue, but just for the public, in case they want to know, next year with primaries, we can have signs throughout the community for 138 days. And I don't believe that falls under our strategic conformance with the strategic plan of a city will be clean, attractive, and inviting. But I'm not sure there's anything I can do about that. So, I guess the only thing I can say is the rest of Kansas will look the same way. So
it's our continued hope that the legislature will go back and adjust or make modifications to the statute, but that's something that cities and counties have been hoping for the past 4 years. So.
We'd have to reinstate the gap. Mr. I did not have time to look up section 3551 regarding the setback. Is there a setback distance from the curb that is in our statute otherwise?
What we have is essentially a formula, and that formula is based on, it's a combination of things, width of street, speed limit, those types of things. When we get a complaint, we go out and calculate what the vision clearance triangle is for a particular location, and then we determine whether the sign is in it. So the vision clearance triangle is defined as an area that's It starts 3 feet above the ground and goes to 8 feet above the ground. And if you have a bush, a sign, some other obstruction that's in that area that's between 3 and 8 feet, and it's in the clear sight where visibility is needed to see oncoming traffic, then we can relocate that. But it is not a fixed distance. It's going to vary based on the width of the street, the width of the right-of-way, the speed of traffic on the street. So it's going to be administered on a case-by-case basis.
So on a typical residential street, is the curb considered the closest to the street that the sign edge should be?
Yes.
That's it. Thank you. Any other?
We did want to clarify that, and we clarified that with the city's legal counsel, that in the way that the amendment is written, is that this is a right that's confirmed to the abutting property owner to put their message out between the sidewalk and the curb, but it's not a blank check to just go anywhere into a median or any other right-of-way that has nothing to do with their property, so.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, comments from the public? Hearing none, bring it back to the commission for action.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, since there's a little urgency on this, I'd like to make a motion, we approve ordinance number 19-11016 on first reading.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 19-11016 on first reading. Any more comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we find compelling public interest exists to allow the second reading on ordinance on the same day.
Could you, we need a general reason for the compelling interest as part of the motion.
I don't know that it would have to be articulated, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So this is just to establish the compelling interest. It's moved and seconded to establish that there is a compelling interest to consider second reading of ordinance 19-11016. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, we approve ordinance number 19-11016 on second reading.
Second. Been moved and seconded to approve ordinance 19-11016 on second reading. We'll need a roll call for that.
Commissioner Hay?
Aye.
Commissioner Hodges?
Aye.
Commissioner Hoppick?
Aye.
Commissioner Ryan?
Aye.
Mayor Davis?
Aye. That's approved 5-0. All right, we are at 7.5.
7.5, resolution number 19-7744, adopting the City of Salina Strategic Planning Report.
Mr. Scrape.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As you well know, you participated in a strategic planning exercise in April of this year, and it was facilitated by the interim director of the School of Public Affairs and Public Management Center at the University of Kansas, Patty Gentrup. And so prior to that, my entire tenure with the city going on 14 years, we used the same facilitator. I haven't gone back to see how far back in time we used the previous facilitator, but this year represented a change in facilitation and as well as a change in approach of conducting that strategic planning session. And I think it, as you can see, also represents a change in the format of the document. So as you recall, we did kind of the typical SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. She facilitated quite a bit of discussion on your part as related to priorities and concerns that you might have, and did an identification of goals and priorities and what's commonly referred to as a dot exercise, where all that inventory is put on a wall, and each of you are given a limited number of dots and a color coding system to indicate your preferences. Out of that, there was some recognition that there were a few items that there was, isolated or very specific consensus. There's quite a bit of just broad cross-section of priorities individually compared to you as a governing body. But the themes that came out of that were concentration on infrastructure, concentration on quality of life, organization of the municipal, development of the municipal organization, economic development, and the city's finances. And so, excerpted in your staff report are those pillars. And there was also an exercise that you participated in to kind of come up with the language related to each one of those priorities. And so you broke into small groups, you came up with that language and reported it out and kind of talked it through and zeroed in on the language that you see in the staff report. So following that then, once the draft was received, a copy of that was shared with you and you had the opportunity to provide feedback. I think I had one question come back to me, and that was the extent of your feedback. And admittedly, was waiting for more, but we concluded that that probably was it. So we're quite a bit of time has passed. Staff's been mindful of these items, but we do need to formally adopt the plan that came out of that exercise. So in addition to that, then you have a copy of the plan itself, and as you'll note, it has an executive summary, has summary information about kind of the exercise that you did to kick off the day in terms of questions that were posed to you individually and that you shared about why you serve and what you enjoy and what frustrates you, as well as then kind of summarizing that SWOT analysis and dot exercise and some of that information. So I don't know, from a staff's perspective, I don't have anything to add in terms of accuracy, and I don't know that we're in a position to go back and change it. We're kind of we'd be doubling back on the conversations you had at the strategic planning exercise. Assuming that, I would tell you that I think Ms. Gentrup shared as part of that process her assessment of our current strategic plan being very lengthy, very detailed, and while it's helpful for staff reports to have kind of that laundry list of choices and ability to zero in on a particular item, some of you have shared with me that goal number 3, ensuring high-quality services, seems to be the one that gets gravitated to quite a bit. But in all honesty, with these 5 pillars, maybe we'll look at reformatting the staff report, but maybe a little bit more difficult to tie every project into something. Obviously, infrastructure, quality of life, the organization are pretty broad. They'll probably fit within one of those categories. But essentially what you have is the product that came out of your strategic planning session for your acknowledgement and acceptance. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Commissioner Hodges.
I don't know that I have any questions for staff, so I'll just wait and make remarks later, but thank you.
I don't have questions, maybe a few comments.
Right. I'm assuming that the sub-items under the 5 general categories are obviously items of the day or of the year, and that these would be addressed on an annual basis to set priorities.
Yeah. In all honesty,
every year, every other year.
Right.
Whichever.
Well, ultimately, it's your decision as a governing body whether you want to do it annually. The assumption is that we would, and in all honesty, I think you as a governing body probably have a conversation about. I think you may have more of an opinion now going into the next cycle about process and your expectations than you might have asserted before this process. So I think there will be an opportunity to come to you with more discussion about what do you want to see out of the next round of strategic planning, and obviously we may have new members on the city commission, but I think there's an opportunity for you as a governing body to provide more input about what your expectations might be for the next round of strategic planning.
Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Hay. All right. Do you want to go into your comments now or wait for public opinion first?
We can wait.
All right. Any comments from the audience, from the public?
Thanks again, John Blanchard, 250 South 9th. I read through the packet, and I had a concern, not really a concern, but a question about what would be included in your financial dashboard. I know that you brought it up in January or February during the whole how did we get here, why didn't we see this coming phase. And you had mentioned that you would be providing a dashboard. Quick question on the dashboard. Is that, would the dashboard be intended for commissioners or for the public to be able to take a look at the financial health of the city? City of Topeka does one that's put on their website for the citizens. I'll let you answer that, but I'll just ask a quick question here, and I'll go sit down and get out of the way. But one of the things with the Star Bond project now in full swing, when we look at sales tax revenues, it was a contention of, or it was a thought of mine, or a prediction or whatever, that when we started that Star Bond thing, we might lose a little bit of the sales tax revenue due to cannibalism. And I would ask that if we do have a dashboard, that something be put on there, because we can have a pretty healthy sales tax revenue, but if it's not going into the general fund, it looks pretty bad. Or it looks worse than it is. Not that that's not bad enough as it is. But if you can maybe just answer that question, and will that be included as part of?
Sure. What we've been trying to do so far, and admittedly we've provided you some graphics, but it's all been manually built as we pour through the data. The software that we have, the financial software that we have, has the ability, if we can get the data formatted in a way that it will automatically generate monthly graphics, and then we can decide, what is appropriate. And staff's already met and talked about kind of identifying the high priority revenue items and the high priority expenditure items, and trying to build the software functionality and the graphics in a way that best convey the message. And that may not be a pie chart for everything, or that may not be a bar graph for everything. So the intention would be to develop a standard set of dashboard indicators and then share them on the city's website on ideally a monthly basis. Now, some of those, property tax isn't going to change much over a year's time, but we can go ahead, it will change a little bit, and we can go ahead and report that. Sales tax, as an example, is something that we pay much more close attention to. And the conversation that we've had is not only the impact that Star Bonds and TIF, we have some TIF districts that are out there as well, have on our activity. And as an example, the cannibalism that Mr. Blanchard's referring to, if we have a sales tax retailer outside the Star Bond district but in the community, and they choose to locate in the downtown, their sales tax represents incremental growth in the Star Bond district, gets captured for the purpose of the Star Bond district, and it gets used to pay for the Star Bonds. And the cannibalism portion of it is, it used to be in our general fund sales tax base outside the Star Bond district, and now it's captured for the Star Bond purpose. The increment, if you recall, both in terms of tax increment financing and Star Bonds, is intended to capture the increment. But as clarification, it's not capturing it doesn't follow that retailer from their location outside the Star Bond district into the Star Bond district and just capture that incremental difference. We established a baseline for the Star Bond district. So that was a point in time with the retailers that were there at that time. The increment that the Department of Revenue will be looking at is just, it used to be, let's say for easy math, it used to be $1 million in the Star Bond district, and now it's $1,100,000. The 100,000 is the increment. They don't get into individual retailers where they came from. So there is the opportunity for cannibalism. So we've already talked about not only reporting out the Star Bond specifically, but then we also have some assumptions as it relates to Star Bond performance. And that impacts the ability to generate the necessary increment to pay off the applicable bonds, whether it's community improvement districts or star bonds. So my vision, if we can get the functionality and the software stood up, is not only to report star bond, but report it against those baseline assumptions. We, at least at the staff level and the city commission level, that's something I think is important for us to monitor.
Just following up on that question really quickly, if the city of Topeka or other cities have a software or an app or something that can do that, is that worth investigating so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel?
It's actually supposedly part of the functionality of the software that we recently purchased and we've been trying to implement both in terms of the financial accounting and payroll. So the functionality is there. Staff has been focused more on revisiting the 2018 budget performance, 2018 budget performance, 2019 budget performance, preparation of the 2020 budget, and with that behind us now, we've moved to trying to figure out this functionality and build some graphical dashboards that it should serve as something that merits reporting on a monthly basis. So in answer to your question, I don't think we need new software, we just got to get the functionality in our current software built.
So did that answer his question about for whose eyes only?
Well, the intention would be to put them on our website. I think that answered the question.
And part of that also, educational sessions for commissioners so that we know how to use the information. Mr. Franz.
I presume it's still public comment.
It is, sir.
Okay. I would like to point out that the software aspect of this is really, really important because there are boatloads of data to process. We used to do a dashboard of sorts based on ICMA's financial indicators, and the last time I looked, the last one we did was still on the website, but it was about 2013 or thereabouts. And we tried to do it once a year, and that was a challenge simply because processing all that information manually was very time consumptive and difficult. So I appreciate the fact that we're trying to get some of that into a more automated fashion. And as I recall...
It starts with building the database in the background so it can repeatedly extract the right information and automatically build the graphic.
And at that time, we had a red light, green light, yellow light system on each indicator, so which was somewhat subjective, I would say. But it did kind of sort of work, but it wasn't often enough, and it was very difficult to accomplish simply from the amount of work that goes into aggregating all that data into some kind of meaningful indicator. So just for whatever it's worth.
Well, and that reminds me too, what staff's talking about, and from what we have been able to provide you, you've seen, we're looking at year-to-date comparisons, rather than for each month, as we produce that graphic, what I'm interested in is where were we at the prior year at this point in time. It's going to fluctuate a little bit, but that's much more of that's the best benchmark we can come up with to see what this year's performance looks like. And so what we've been doing behind the scenes is looking at each one of those and trying to figure out what that benchmark should be. As an example, sales tax is not 1/12 a month all year long. It has a cycle to it, but it's hard to pick that up. So we're going back through historic data and saying, okay, on average, what percentage of year end was February? And then we're trying to go in and find any anomalies and say, well, for whatever reason, maybe it was a month early, and so this year was high, and another year it was a month late, and so it was low. We're trying to extract those anomalies and create a trend line that we are comfortable with to then have a basis of comparison for year to date, and also use that as a basis to project year end. And admittedly, things can change, but that's the best analysis we've been able to find. And then you got to get all the data in the background into a database that this automated graphical generation can be relied upon. Mr. Franz is absolutely right. Trying to do that manually, month by month, with a dozen to 2 dozen indicators. The conversations we're literally having are formatting 1 month to the next and data accuracy. We got to get this built so it can kind of take care of itself, in terms of as much automation as possible. Otherwise, we are at annual reporting at best, and we need to be more responsive than that.
Thank you. Any other comments? No? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, I appreciate having someone come in who was new to kind of help give us a fresh look. And I think that as I look through this report, and the reason I didn't give you a lot of feedback is, and I think Ms. Gentrup struggled with it at that time, is you have 5 people with 5 very divergent opinions, and I think that's reflected in this document. I'd love to have a conversation about what we're truly wanting to get out of strategic planning for next year, because I think that it was good to have someone new come in, and at least I think we're getting some things simplified down so that it's at least a little bit more usable document. But I think that there's a lot more value to be had out there, and I hope that, as we approach it for 2020, that we do some discussion ahead of time about what exactly we want to see come out of this document. That would just be my request, is that that we put some planning into our strategic planning and what exactly we want to see out of that, because otherwise, I mean, this is a reflection of some of what it's an accurate reflection. It's also incredibly disjointed, and there was not a lot of consensus on it. So, I mean, it's kind of like we can keep polishing it, and that we're just going to end up with a shiny strategic plan. So, at any rate, that was my take on our strategic plan.
I think you stole some of my thunder. Because, I looked through this, and I guess I got to admit I was somewhat disappointed. It didn't give us any direction. And to me, a strategic plan does that, and I agree 100%. At least the 2 of us will be here next year for that. Not sure who else, but sorry, guys, I can only tell you who I know is going to be here. But I do think that we need to evaluate what we want to see come out of the strategic plan. And some of the stuff I think we need to do is, again, whether it's current commissioners, individuals who have been commissioners before, is we need to and again, we're talking about the dashboards, I think educate ourselves more on the budget, on the star bond income, the standalone funds, the TIF, the CID. I think we need more direction on how that's working and how we expect it to work, and set some goals to look at those, and maybe a half hour every quarter, part of a study session is reviewing where we're at on some of this, so we're not getting caught off guard and stuff. So anyway, we had somebody different. I'm not sure. I felt like we got a lot of the different results that we'd had before. So
my feelings were that it was a little bit messy as well. I think that going forward, it was useful conversations that we had as a group, but of course the group is probably not the same next year. But I think if more time is spent on the goal setting, a portion of it, that might be more useful or extended somehow. But I think we focused too much into the portion of the day that was on that goal setting. Maybe it's best to do one part of the activity one day and come back and with some sleep on it and finish it up.
I kind of agree with Commissioner Hodges that she had an uphill battle when she started this strategic planning, because, like I said, we had 5 different people and 5 different just, we're all different. And I think that was a challenge for her to try to get that all put together, and I think she struggled with that during the whole day.
Yeah, I would agree. The one observation I would offer you is I've observed or participated in DOT exercises many, many times, and I think, as you recall, that was the final exercise, that was the culmination of the conversation, and we were, kind of pressing to get that done by the end of the day. I don't think it became apparent until after that DOT exercise was done that there was lack of consensus. I mean, typically that crystallizes the group's consensus on, what really are the priorities, and it can work very effectively. We got to the end of the day, the end of our time block, and that exercise did not identify consensus, and she acknowledged that, but I don't know what it would have taken to, and how much time it would have taken to facilitate even more conversation. At that point, you as a governing body are having to really talk through individual, I think this is a priority because, and can anybody else see my point of view?
I'm going to disagree with all five of you. The strategic plan, the fewer items we have, the closer I think we can identify who are we as the city of Salina. What do we stand for? Do we stand for recycling? Do we stand for connectivity in our neighborhoods? Do we stand for parks? And we have the things that are important to us, or these things highlighted in purple. That priority list, that's different. That's a budgetary item. That's going to change every year. In fact, it may change every quarter when we start looking at the dashboards. The utility and the burden on the next commission is going to be to set our budget based on what's important to us. If we have to amend our regulations for developments every time a development comes up, if we have to circumvent the strategic plan every time we want to do something, the land use map, then there's something wrong with those documents. If every time you encounter a document, you have to make an amendment to go around it. So I think that there are two separate issues. One is, who do we say we are? And the two is proving it by putting our time and money on those items that we say are important, and separating ourselves from those things that our outcomes say really aren't important or don't get us any bang for the buck. So for us to walk in there expecting that we're all five are going to agree, and I think the beauty of this commission is we're like the Pentagon. I mean, you have to find a side to attack us on, and we got all five sides covered here. So it works from that perspective, but I think we came up with a pretty good list of what's important to us.
Mayor, that's a good point. It's hard to jump into the conversation, but that is a good point. And my sense and staff's approach going forward is going to be that these five things do represent what you have consensus about. Right. So if you don't feel like you have consensus on the items highlighted in purple, I would encourage you to talk about that right now before you go further. But I think that there was consensus about those. I think that's a pretty accurate representation.
Right. I have to say I was pretty satisfied with the way the mission statement turned out. Mm-hmm. It's just like we didn't get it done. We have some good things in purple, but we just didn't quite complete the exercise.
But it was fun. We have a choice of accepting this, modifying it, or not accepting it in some form or fashion. Is there any action any commissioner would like to take?
Mr. Mayor, I move we accept approve resolution number 1977-44, accepting the City Commission Strategic Plan Summary.
Second.
Be moved and seconded to approve resolution 19-7744. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. We have the option of going to 7-6 and development business now, or anyone like a 5-minute break? Or you want to do 7-6 and then take a 5-minute break?
Let's do 7-6.
Let's do 7-6. Could you read 7-6, please? I guess there's not much to read. You can make it up as you go along. At least you know it'll be correct in your records.
7.6, discussion addressing the Kansas Open Meeting Act violation at the September 16, 2019 special city commission meeting.
All right, I will start by asking the city attorney to, off the top of your head, I hope, explain what would be the typical procedure if we self-report an apparent violation.
It is my understanding that the Attorney General's office, if we contacted them, would instruct that they have a complaint form on their website, and that that would be completed on behalf of the city. That's not based on a conversation directly with them, but that's my understanding of their preferred procedure.
And is that something that would need to be approved by this body before it is sent, so to speak, or is that just general wording? We list the facts of what happened, and I mean, in other words, could the city manager and the mayor do that, the two of us, or is that something, the wording should be approved here before it's forwarded?
That is something I would expect that I would want to consult with the Attorney General's office about, if that was, if it is your choice to make that report. The reason I say that, certainly if it is a collective submission, they would want you to act on that collectively. I expect that is the circumstance we would be in this case, given the relatively simple fact scenario that we are under. Now, certainly development of that in anticipation of governing body consideration, I think that certainly could involve you with the city manager if that was your wish. And I think there are some details that should be addressed in terms of making sure that this matter is proceeding in a manner that collectively you all are comfortable with and wish to occur.
Are there any other procedural questions?
No, I guess my only question would be, since normally we don't have a meeting on the fifth Monday of the month like we do, but we're having a special meeting on the fifth Monday of this month, would it be possible for us to go ahead and be able to add that to the agenda for next week's meeting so that we can go ahead and proceed with that instead of putting it off until the October 7th meeting or whatever that is, October 6th?
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is there a second?
I had a couple questions.
Don't forget.
A question of staff, I guess, is, I know Ms. Ratzlaff commented, I think that there's a list. Is there a list for separate types of meetings, or is there a list that certain people get notified of any time there's a commission meeting, a special meeting, a planning and zoning? I mean,
our current approach is on our website. You have the ability to, we have kind of an automated sign up and subscription and unsubscription process. So as a citizen, you can go into that web page, and Building Advisory Board as an example, Planning Commission, Heritage Commission, and I'm working from memory. I haven't looked at it in a while, but there's a laundry list of different groups that you can sign up for, rather than you just get inundated with every meeting notice that we send out. So you can self-subscribe to that list. That's the source of our distribution. Now, having said that, the statute doesn't make a distinction between paper notice and email notice. I'm not aware of anyone that has indicated they want notice other than email, but if they did, we'd have to accommodate that as well. But we rely on that software and that functionality to kind of manage that distribution list. State statute provides that we can. We haven't historically wipe the slate clean and start it over annually, in part because you can, self-unsubscribe, so we feel like that's probably pretty responsive.
And I guess my question, again, before I get to my last comment, was, do we know how we missed that list? Was it just an oversight?
Straight up human error.
That happens.
I would acknowledge that, and I've started down the path of, following the strategic planning session where this occurred 2 years ago, there was quite a bit of conversation in the city manager's office, and I think we kind of thought we had the procedures in place. Now, having said that, we have a lot of boards and committees that are administered by staff liaison. So I'm working on a written communication that provides additional clarification, so we're not working off of memory, and we're not as reliant on, I haven't come up with a solution to get past the human error aspect of it. I personally subscribe to not all of those distribution lists that are on our website, but the ones of particular importance. But I have to admit, they come in, and so many of them come in, and I just look at it, and that's an acknowledgement for me that it went out. But I have not programmed myself, and I guess I may have to proactively say, I need to make sure that this notice went out on Tuesday and this one went out on Thursday. It's just a way for me to kind of see what's going out.
Yeah. And I guess our communication with the Attorney General, if we decide to do that, will be, how we anticipate correcting that error. And again, it's human error. But again, there was nothing malicious done. I mean, obviously, we did publications like we always do, and it was, so.
In all honesty, I think, maybe on your part and on the part of some staff, that's kind of the general expectation is public notice, a press release satisfies the requirement, and the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, that actually doesn't satisfy that is not the requirement in question. It's the personal, individual notice that is specified by statute, right, and then we failed to
I guess what I'm saying is we weren't trying to hide it from anybody. We just missed a notification that should have gone out, and we just need to figure a way to hopefully
not to
have that
belie
again.
the seriousness of it, but how many of us have queued up an email and forgot to hit the send button? So I would just like to put this right as quick as possible, and I'd not maybe understanding the logic of having a special meeting if we could cure this right now by directing the staff to.
That was probably my question. I mean, we dropped the ball. I mean,
I think I can answer that. We already have a special meeting set, so this is just adding to that agenda.
Understand that, but I mean, why do we have to, I mean, we know that we did wrong, we know that there was a problem, we know that we need to take care of it. Why don't we just go ahead and say, let's go ahead and turn it over and get the stuff done and not worry about a special meeting down the line? We made a mistake, we screwed up, we need to make it right.
And I think I know what Greg's going to say, but staff's failure reflects on you as a governing body, and the consequences could very well be mandatory training for you. Hopefully it won't come to that, but in other communities that are more flagrant, and this is not our first occurrence recently, so it has the potential of impacting you as a governing body. I don't know if that's where you're headed, Greg, but.
I would just say we stand behind the staff, and maybe we need to take our big boy, big girl medicine, but.
Well, Mayor and Commissioners, if I may, the one thing to keep in mind, if I understood Mr. Blanchard correctly, he has already filed a complaint.
That's the way I understood it.
Was that today? Okay. So you have a complaint pending. I had come prepared today. In fact, the city clerk already has the motion to advise you in executive session about the circumstances, the legal context, the option of self-reporting, all of the above, expecting that you would want to deal with this as forthrightly and expeditiously, but within your, correctly, as soon as possible. in anticipation of your determination of whether you added this item and took it up today. There are some elements of this self-reporting aspect that I would appreciate the opportunity to advise you about. That can either be done in an executive session, or I suppose it could be done publicly, but as we know, I can't assume what you would wish to be kept as attorney-client privileged in this context. Again, not trying to make it harder than it needs to be, but Plan A, when we walked into the room, was to give you that opportunity to be advised in executive session, if that was your wish, on the situation.
If I can just say, just speaking for myself, I'm fine dealing with it out here. I mean, I think that the facts are known, and it just strikes me that there's just the tiniest hint of irony excusing ourselves into executive session to discuss our coma violations. So I just assumed we have that discussion out here. That's my preference, is we just, if you've got your talking points prepared, let's just do it here.
And I guess I would ask the city attorney if, in his opinion, there are things that he might discuss that might later need to be divulged in a, for lack of a better term, a formal hearing that should be held under attorney-client privilege, and obviously not knowing what he's going to say, I can't judge it. I have to rely on his judgment. One thing the five of us are not is an attorney.
Well, I wouldn't have come prepared with a motion if I didn't think we had matters that warranted attorney-client privilege discussion. And that, frankly, is heightened by the fact that you have a pending complaint as of this morning in relation to this matter.
Just one procedural issue: to recess into executive session for this would not require an addition to the amendment, would it? I mean, to the agenda.
At this point, you've got it on your agenda, and
Yeah, I understand.
any other agenda item we potentially could.
I suppose
That's true. That, you can scratch that question.
I'll defer to the attorney, but that's just me
true. It's
thinking
already
out
on.
loud.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right, that's true. Makes sense.
The thing that your point brings to mind, we moved to this numbered item. Does anyone recall better than I whether the vote was taken to actually add the item
Add
for
it to the
discussion?
agenda?
It was.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I was...
5-0, yes.
Very good. Then I think you are in a position, either way, to have the executive session. I think the talking points I can outline in 2 minutes. If you want to come back and simply discuss those publicly, then would welcome that opportunity. If you believe that there's further discussion that warrants a attorney-client privilege consultation, then we could go back in.
Well, I, for one, think we should avail ourselves of our counsel's and the executive session to hear his perspective. It's what we retain him for, so.
Is there a written motion that would be read? If
Yes, that was
any
presented to the city clerk prior to the meeting
And I'm
beginning.
going to pass this to go ahead and pass that to one of my peers.
Should we do 5 minutes?
That would be fine.
Mayor Davis, I move the City Commission recess into executive session for 5 minutes to discuss with legal counsel the subject of the absence of direct notice of the special meeting of the City Commission at 12:30 p.m. Monday, September 16th, 2019, to certain persons having requested notice of meetings of the City Commission pursuant to KSA 75-4318B, based upon the need for consultation with an attorney for the public body, which would be deemed privileged in the attorney-client relationship pursuant to KSA 457319B2. The open meeting will resume in this room at 6:05.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to recess into executive session for the reasons read. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1. We will return at
6:05.
6:05.
You did the math all by yourself, that's not
It was
fair.
easy.
Oh, you need that back?
All right, call the meeting back into regular session. We did have some discussion on the item regarding the open meetings violation. Is there any action? I'm sorry, City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, if I may, I do appreciate the opportunity to consult with you quickly, and as I understood, you had thought it best to discuss the matter, anything that I had advised you about in the open session, and that's certainly fine as long as that's consistent with your wishes. The point that I felt the need to judge in a privileged communication were that certainly self-reporting is viewed by the Attorney General as a favorable mitigating factor, the acknowledgement of the problem and the concern. The other aspect of that is that in making that report, we would, of course, report all relevant facts relating to the problem with the notice. I had also recommended to you that self-reporting include a request that the Attorney General's office evaluate all of the facts related to the matter, and that they would, in their judgment, determine whether they believed it to be a technical violation. That is a distinction that I could speak of. My opinion on it doesn't really matter. No one else's matters so much. It's an evaluation performed by the Attorney General's office based on the facts of the matter. But I do think it would be in the city's interest to make the request that that evaluation include a consideration of whether this was, in their judgment, a technical violation. So those are the matters I wanted to discuss with you, and I appreciate the chance to do so, both as we did in the executive session and happy to try to answer any questions now.
As a procedural record, when the report is submitted, I assume it has all 5 of our names on it as the commission, or just one name, or, and the reason I bring that up is if we were going to, that would be the reason for considering this in addition to our next meeting, just so that if other commissioners have to sign this report, there would be no question as to what they were signing their name to.
Certainly, that would be fine. We could, not having had a conversation with the Attorney General's office on this matter specifically, I'm speculating a bit, but that self-report could certainly be initiated, and if it were the Commission's desire, we could have a consultation with the Attorney General or Attorney General's office in the meantime, to be sure that we were proceeding as they would expect procedurally. I would expect that what you have described would likely be their preference. Acknowledgement by all 5 commissioners that, whether by vote or by signature, that it was a collective report.
Thank you.
And if you wish, I do have a roughed out motion that would authorize the self-report, or the preparation of the self-report, and including a request that the Attorney General's office evaluation result in a finding of a technical violation.
I think that would be greatly appreciated.
I have one roughed out too, but I'm guessing yours is better.
Well, I don't know. I'm tumbling now for mine. My things got a little, as I picked my things up,
That's state council's advice.
just need to add to it briefly, if I may.
Mr. Mayor, while we're waiting, and in recognition of the fact that we have intended to take action on this all along, and that we are, would it be reasonable to ask Mr. Blanchard if he'd be willing to withdraw his complaint?
It'd be reasonable. Mr. Blanchard, would you like to? Apologize for putting you on the spot like this, but.
Oh, I don't mind. I appreciate the question. My answer would be no, because I'm not sure that there's a procedure that's involved in that. But, you know, I hear about, well, we didn't mean it, and, you know, we're going to request that it's a technical mistake. I think they're all technical mistakes. I mean, I don't think there's really a distinction. I don't think anybody at the city manager's office intentionally didn't send out a notification. But the one requirement is that a notification be sent to people that request a notification be sent. The law clearly states that putting it in the newspaper or on your web page or anything isn't even required. The only requirement is that you send it out to the people who ask for it. I don't take the newspaper. I don't regularly go to the city website to say, I wonder what the latest news releases were. I wanted to go to that meeting. I found out about it after it was done in the newspaper. I appreciate that the newspaper was there and that Salina Media Connection was there. But the truth is we hear about how everybody gets along so well, and when I watch the video, there are significant, difficult decisions being made, and not everybody's agreeing on everything. So the public gets an inaccurate picture when we're not invited to the table, when we ask that we be invited to the table. So it may be a technical violation on your point, but I didn't get notification to go to a meeting that I would have been at. I appreciate that Rod Franz was at the meeting. He may take the paper, he may read the city newspaper, but he didn't get notified in the way that the COMA requires people to be notified. So while I appreciate that question, I think even if I had the opportunity to withdraw it, I don't think I would, because I don't want to make light of the fact that COMA and CORA are one of our core responsibilities on a governing body. When Randall Hardy and I were elected in 2013, the very first training that we pursued was COMA and CORA training in Topeka. It was stressed very, very much so by not only the people in Topeka at the League of Kansas Municipalities, but it was very important to Mr. Bankson and to Jason Gage that they said, you guys really need to have this and understand it fully. I appreciate, Mike, what you said about checking the box yourself and getting notifications to double check. That is exactly what I did, and it's what I recommend that you do. And the reason I did it is I said, if I'm getting the notifications, then I know that the Joan Ratzlaffs and everybody else that has asked for those notifications are getting those notifications, okay? It's the job of somebody to make sure that those notifications are made. And I agree that there are technical, that they didn't mean to do it. I mean, there's a lot going on and they do it. It's their job. It's the responsibility of you folks to make sure that we are informed, okay? Their job is to inform you. Your job is to inform us. And so I would say thank you, though, for putting this on your agenda and being serious enough about it to have this conversation. And Mr. Hay, Commissioner Hay, I'd like to appreciate the comments that you made earlier about, let's just admit that we made a mistake and let's do better next time. But let's move it behind us. So I appreciate those comments. Thank you.
I think that might be a good idea to add to new commissioner training, or an old commissioner training as well. Just get us to sign up for the boxes.
I do have the proposed motion, if I can approach with that.
You want to, okay. Oh, it's a long one. I will hand it over to you.
Before I read it, I guess I would answer, I'm not sure anyone up here takes COMA or CORA lightly. I do realize that it's important, and I think that's why we are at this point now. So, Mayor Davis, I move to authorize the self-reporting by the city to the Office of the Attorney General of circumstances surrounding notice of the special meeting of the City Commission conveyed at 12:30 p.m. Monday, September 16th, 2019, in the Saline County Health Department conference room, with a request that any violation be found to have been technical in nature.
Second.
Moved
I'm sorry.
and seconded to, if I might, thank you, to authorize the self-reporting of the city to the Attorney General regarding the special meeting that occurred on September 16, 2019. Any additional comments?
I guess my only question is why we have to, you mentioned that the Attorney General's office is going to make the finding that they make, yet we're requesting that it's technical in nature. I mean, to me, it has a bit of a, I don't know, presumptuous feel to it, and I mean, like, we're asking, I don't know, I just don't like, leaving that technical requirement in there, or that technical verbiage.
Any questions, additional comments? I think, well, for me personally, it conveys that there was a procedure that normally works did not work this one time for a technical reason. The Attorney General is, I'm sure, bright enough to see through the way we write the request to do his own investigation.
There was no malice in our efforts, as we discussed earlier, so.
Oh, I agree.
I'm okay with this, so.
Yeah, I agree.
Mayor, if I may, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to move, we're all moving fairly quickly here, I think. To Commissioner Hodges' point, and as we discussed quickly and maybe not so completely here, the point was not to try to direct the outcome, or my intent with that language, but as I read it, I can see the point that if we are asking, I want, from the city standpoint, my recommendation or the concern was just to be sure that the Attorney General knew that we would appreciate them evaluating that aspect. And I recognized with that, in reference to with a request that the violation be found to have been technical in nature, is it helpful if that instead simply indicates that with a request that they evaluate whether the violation was technical in nature?
I think that simple turn of the phrase makes all the difference.
Yeah, I appreciate the point, and I'm sorry I didn't process that in our putting it together.
But the motion maker and the second approve the
Correct changes.
You second it? Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that comment.
As long as the clerk got the corrected.
One point of clarification, if the intention is to return the final draft to you for action and signature, then we could certainly you'll have another opportunity to look at that language. If your intent is based on this direction for staff to prepare that and then, for you to sign it, I guess that's a clarification we want to make sure that we get.
Is this a document that we can simply come into the office and sign? Or does that have to be done, do we have to agree publicly on the verbiage and then sign it?
Our concern would be to be doing absolutely well. Yeah, there's the open aspect, but there's also the matter of proceeding precisely in the manner that the Attorney General wants us to proceed in this situation. I am expecting that, if possible, the Attorney General's office will want evidence that whatever we submit represents your collective thought and request. So I would expect that whether they ask that everyone sign or whether they just ask to see a resolution or just some public action, I think will be well served by you all having an opportunity to review it and publicly approve it.
So in light of that, the final nuanced verbiage will be something that you'll have an opportunity to look at before it goes out the door.
Thank you. And that would be, we would need to add that
To our next Monday.
Correct.
Yes, staff will go ahead and add that. Not to take us too far off track, there is a slight, and I stress slight, possibility that we may have need for a special meeting prior to next Monday, just depending on how a legislative issue plays out. So my intention would be to put it on the next Monday's meeting. In the event that we have need for a special meeting, we could add it to that agenda and do it even sooner.
All right. So we do have a motion on the floor. Ready to vote?
If I'm sorry.
Sir.
I apologize,
Take
Mayor.
as much time as you'd like.
I created the confusion, and now I'm wanting to be sure I understand. Was the motion modified?
Yes.
As we discussed?
Modified, and Commissioner Ryan seconded.
Thank you.
It'd be helpful to have the clerk read it back, or do you want?
Hi, Allison.
And we can read it out loud again.
So just reread it?
Well, with the
We-
change, you need
we
to
made-
have council.
Seemed to roll pretty well previously.
And not to be overly cryptic about the need for a special meeting while he's working on that, I just became aware before coming down to the meeting that there's an FCC ruling that could impact distribution of cable franchise fees. And with a little bit more information, it might necessitate us taking action in a special meeting. But honestly, don't know. Just got that piece of information as I was headed out the door.
I do have just one procedural question. What is the amount of time before the meeting that's allowed for U.S. Mail to deliver?
I don't know that there's actually a provision for that. I mean, having worked in another state, there were time frame requirements imposed that you had to get notice out in advance. From what I've read in the state statute, I don't know that it addresses that.
Because it's a particular issue in this city since our local
Yes.
mail
Yep.
takes a little sightseeing tour before it gets delivered. And
Correct.
adds a day or two.
And we find that with weed notices, weed letters and notices of planning and zoning hearings, that type of thing. And most of the time it works, but every now and then it's an added delay and it can be a problem. But we typically, we're putting the packet, as you know, we're putting the packet out on Thursday. And right now, to my knowledge, we distribute electronically to all the individuals that have requested it.
Okay, thank you. All right. We'll hear from the city clerk.
It was moved to authorize the self-reporting by the city to the Office of the Attorney General of circumstances surrounding notice of the special meeting of the City Commission convened at 12:30 p.m. Monday, September 16, 2019, in the Salina County Health Department conference room with a request they evaluate whether any violation was technical in nature.
Okay, I'm just going to ask the Salina media technician in the back if he could hear that. All right. We'll have to.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, pass it down.
Just, yeah, I don't.
To a mic.
All right. I move to authorize the self-reporting by the city to the Office of the Attorney General of circumstances surrounding notice of the special meeting of the City Commission convened at 12:30 p.m. Monday, September 16th, 2019, in the Salina County Health Department conference room with a request that they evaluate whether any violation was technical in nature.
All right, we are ready to vote. All in favor of the motion just read, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you for your indulgence. We now have a need for a break. You can add this to the next week's agenda without our direction. Thank you.
Well, the next meeting you have,
The
I
next
will
meeting we have,
add it to the
okay.
agenda. And not to drag it out further, but I envisioned this as reporting out to a question in public comment and anticipated we'd kind of head there in this conversation. I apologize. It would have been easier for you just to be on your agenda to start.
All right, a break has been requested. 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? 5 minutes. Take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. Oh, man. Guessing we should wait for the people at home who went to the kitchen and the bathroom known we'd be back in 5 minutes, not 4, but we should go ahead and go because that multicolored logo is not on the screen. We are, okay. We will call the meeting back into regular session and proceed with development item 8.1.
Item 8.1, application number M19-9, filed by Jones Gillum Renz Architects on behalf of Kansas Wesleyan University, requesting an amendment of the future land use map of the Salina, Kansas Comprehensive Plan to change the future land use designation of property located on the north side of Claflin and the south side of Kerwin, west of South 4th Street, from future urban residential to future public, semi-public.
Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. We have two companion items for your consideration this evening relating to the Kansas Wesleyan University campus. And recently, the city's development review team had a meeting with representatives of Kansas Wesleyan and their architects, Jones Gillum Renz, and we focused on two things: the future growth and expansion of the Kansas Wesleyan University campus and their programs, and we also discussed a specific zoning question as it relates to the former clinic building that's located at 135 East Kerwin. And the map that's on the screen is everything highlighted in yellow, and now at the time of this map preparation, this property, the clinic property, was owned by Salina Regional Health Foundation, but they have now transferred ownership of that building and property to Kansas Wesleyan University. So this is the main campus for Kansas Wesleyan University, but you can also see that they have acquired properties to the west and these properties to the north. And so the first application, based on their plans for expansion of programs in areas north of Claflin, is an application to amend the future land use plan to recognize the ownership and use of the property located on the west side of South 4th Street, on the south side of Kerwin, and the south side of Claflin. And the first application that was filed was requesting that the property that be designated as public, semi-public on the future land use map. So this is the current land use map for the city. This is reflective of Kansas Wesleyan's use and ownership of the property, and they're requesting that this area be expanded to encompass this property here north of Claflin. And so they recently acquired the property right on the corner of 4th and Claflin from Salina Regional Health Foundation. They have plans to convert that building and associated property to a new nursing school for Kansas Wesleyan University. The building would have several classrooms, offices, and learning labs. That property is presently zoned R2 residential, and a nursing school would not be permitted under that current zoning classification. So their first request would be to consider an amendment of the comprehensive plan to support their companion application requesting a change in zoning classification for those properties on Kerwin and Claflin. And some of the factors that you're to consider that they have noted was they believe the future land use map amended is justified by changing conditions in the community and their need to expand campus programs and to acquire a suitable facility for their nursing degree program. Educational institutions like Kansas Wesleyan are considered to be public, semi-public land uses as depicted by the blue on this land use map. The properties on Claflin and Kerwin include the vacant medical clinic, are adjacent right here, adjacent and across the street from the existing campus. The change in land use designation would allow the expansion of their campus to better serve the public by allowing them to move into this building. The R2 zoning and urban residential land use designation doesn't reflect the historic use of this clinic property, and the proposed change in use will differ only slightly from the historical use of that property, and this has been used as a medical clinic since 1956. So the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this land use map request, and at the conclusion of their hearing, they voted 6-0 to change the future land use map designation of this property on the north side of Claflin and the south side of Kerwin, which includes the residence of the college president right here. And they found that Kansas Wesleyan had acquired additional property north of Claflin and is expanding its campus program. They found that educational institutions are considered to be public, semi-public, and not residential land use. And the city's strategic plan recommends that the city take steps to advance the presence and community impact of post-secondary education. And so expansion of the nursing program would be consistent with that goal. These properties are adjacent to the existing campus, and the current residential land use designation does not reflect the historic use of the clinic building and will not impact properties differently for how the property's been used for the last 60 years. So as far as the land use map amendment, you have 4 options, or 3 options. One would be to concur with the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission and expand the public, semi-public designation to that property. You could refer this item back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration and state your reasons for disagreeing with their recommendation, or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and decide that the future land use designation should remain in place, and you could make a motion that the attached ordinance not be approved. If you decide that the existing land use designation should be retained, that action alone would not preclude Kansas Wesleyan from converting the building to a nursing school, but it would indicate a lack of support for Kansas Wesleyan's companion application to rezone the property to a university designation. So with that, I'd be open to any questions you have. The project architect is still here if you have questions.
We didn't mean to take you on such a tour through government processes, but thanks for
As long as you've been
staying.
entertained, we've done our job.
Any questions for Mr. Andrew?
So I'd answer any questions about the land use map, anything related specifically to the project, I would refer to Mr. Renz. So.
Thank you. Any questions from the public? All right, in that case, is there any action to be taken by the commission?
Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve ordinance number 19-11014.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve on first reading ordinance number 19-11014. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. 8.2, and Mr. Andrew again.
Thank you. This is the companion item that deals with the specific zoning designation, and we actually have multiple properties. We have 2 properties on Kerwin, 126 Kerwin, which is a vacant lot that was purchased and the lot demolished in 2017. 130 East Kerwin is the residence of the college president, Dr. Thompson. That is a single-family dwelling that was constructed in 1935. We have 117 East Claflin. That is formerly the site of some homes that were demolished and converted into parking to serve the Kansas Wesleyan campus. It's also shared with University United Methodist Church. And then we have 135 East Claflin, which was constructed as a medical clinic in 1956 and has been continually used for that purpose. Back in 1977, when the city was comprehensively rezoned and remapped, a decision was made to retain residential zoning on the north side of Claflin, and even the clinic site was zoned R2 which made it a grandfathered use, but the Planning Commission was reluctant to spot zone this site commercial, so this retained a residential zoning designation and has since that time. Kansas Wesleyan has now acquired ownership of the former clinic building, and they have plans to convert it into a nursing school facility, and they believe it would be beneficial if their properties on Claflin and Kerwin were zoned to University District to conform with the zoning of the remainder of their campus. So Jones Gillum Wren submitted an application on their behalf, and as you can see from the map, we have R1, we have R2, and we have R3 zoning, and they have requested that those properties be redesignated as University District zoning. And the idea behind the University District is to give colleges and universities more flexibility than they would have if they were located in a residential district, because we have a number of public schools that were located in residential districts, and residential districts are really designed in a way to regulate residential uses, not institutional type uses. So they are requesting to have the same flexibility for the use of these properties here that they have on the south side of Claflin. And so, as they noted, the clinic is a non-conforming use. It can't be expanded. It can't be changed to another non-residential use, such as a university classroom, without a change in zoning district classification. And Kansas Wesleyan has included the other properties just because they think that makes sense and it would be a logical expansion of their campus. So there are utilities in place, and all public services are in place to serve the anticipated uses, and access would be and continue to be from Kerwin and Claflin. Those are classified as residential streets. So the Planning Commission also conducted a public hearing on this request at their September 3rd meeting, and they voted unanimously to recommend approval of a change in zoning district classification for this property. They felt that the properties are more suitable for university use than continued residential use due to their proximity to the campus, and that the R2 zoning on this building inhibits its reuse as a facility for the nursing program. They believe it was a logical extension of the existing campus. Needed utilities are already in place, and although a land use map amendment was needed, the Planning Commission felt that that was justified due to the location of this property in relation to the other activity centers on campus. So you have the same options with this item. You could approve an ordinance rezoning the property on first reading, consistent with the Planning Commission recommendation. You could refer this application back to the Planning Commission for reconsideration. You could direct the applicant to resubmit this application as a planned development district. This would require them to submit a site plan for your review, and also give you the opportunity to approve a more restrictive list of permitted uses than what the University District would allow. Or you could overturn the recommendation of the Planning Commission and decide that this property should remain residential. So if you choose that option, the property would be limited to only those uses allowed in the R1, R2, and R3 districts, and this would not include a nursing school. So if you were to approve this on first reading today, second reading would occur at your October 7th meeting. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the zoning of this property or nearby properties, or again, if you have project-specific questions about the nursing school, I'd refer those to Mr. Renz.
Somewhat of an outlandish question. If Kansas Wesleyan wanted to demolish the president's house and take that property, they would be able to put a dormitory I mean, that property could be used any way that university.
If they wanted to demolish that and convert it to campus housing for students on that property, that would be a permitted use under the university designation, or if they wanted to put a classroom building there, that would be permitted under the university designation.
Okay, and would the electronic changeable copy sign still be permitted since there's residential on the other side of the street?
The electronic changeable copy sign would be permitted if it met those
Restrictions.
limitations.
Right, okay.
And that would be the same if there was a church or a school located on the property, they would also be able to have an electronic changeable copy sign, but subject to all those limitations as to size, hours of operation, those types of things.
All right, thank you. Any questions from the public? Okay, any action to be taken by
Mayor
this commission?
Davis, oh, sorry. Mayor Davis, I move that we approve on first reading ordinance number 19-11015, changing the zoning district classification from R3, R2, and R1 to U, University District, on the properties addressed as 126 East Kerwin Avenue, 130 East Kerwin Avenue, 117 East Claflin, and 135 East Claflin Avenue.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve on first reading ordinance 19-11015. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And I know we have at least one other business.
Okay.
Go ahead, dear. This will be fun. You'll enjoy this.
I had a young lady from Cottonwood School approach me here several weeks ago, and it seemed like they watched the commission meetings on TV. And she was wondering during the Pledge of Allegiance, how come I'm always ahead of everybody in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? And I explained to her that a lot of people, not intentionally, does not do the Pledge of Allegiance the right way. When the Pledge of Allegiance was written out, and in its present form, there is no comma between one nation under God. So in the schools, and even I've been to many schools and many scout meetings, they'll come out and they'll say, one nation under God. It should be one nation under God. No hesitation at all. So I explained to her that's how come it always seemed like I'm ahead of everybody when I get ready to do that. I've worked real hard over the years to get the scout troops and the Coronado Area Council, the kids that I work with, to say the Pledge of Allegiance right. I worked with our AMBUC group, and our AMBUC group now has taken that on, and they pretty well hold right to it. So anyway, I just wanted to explain to the people why I'm always a little bit ahead of everybody sometimes when I say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Now, what I'm really curious to see is what's going to happen at our next meeting. If you can change 60-plus-year-old habits or not. But it's, I actually did some reading. Commissioner Hay and I were talking about it last week. And there are some written versions that have the comma, but apparently the official United States government version does not have the comma. But, you know, some things we're taught all is one long string of words, and the Pledge of Allegiance probably fits under that. So we'll see what happens at the next meeting. Thank you for the education. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Yeah, it's going to take more than that.